Hi, everyone. Welcome to the December 13th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona, and I'll be joined in just a second by my co-host, Craig Milkowski. This week on the podcast, we're going to take a look at some graded stakes racing at Gulfstream Park. That's where the focus of today's show is. Not a whole lot of other graded stakes racing happening elsewhere in the country, so we're going to focus on the stakes down in Florida. There are four of those: the Sugar Swirl, the Rampart, the Harlan's Holiday, and the Fort Lauderdale. We'll talk about all of those. We'll also mention a couple of two-year-old stakes races at the end of the show. One in New York on Saturday for $500,000. Some New York breds competing for a big pop there, and one on Sunday at Remington Park, the Springboard Mile, going the mile. Early Derby prep, maybe some horses that'll advance to the Triple Crown races out of that one. So we'll get to that in a bit. But Craig, looking forward to talking about these races. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to talk about them as well. I actually get to go see some quality live racing on Sunday at Remington. I mean, it's always good, but it's one of their big days, so I'll be there in person. So good weekend for racing for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were going to go because that's an exciting race. Some horses in there that might be able to springboard to some graded stakes later on. We'll get to that in a little bit, though. Let's talk about some of those graded stakes at Gulfstream Park to start things off. We'll just take them in chronological order, beginning with the sixth race on the card, the first of the stakes, the Sugar Swirl, a grade 3 going 6 furlongs for the fillies and mares. And I think the first thing we really have to talk about in this race is the pace projector, because there is just a ton of speed signed on. All of the horses seemingly that are short prices on the morning line, they really need the lead types. They're going to be gunning for the front. What do you make of the pace situation? Even if there's a collapse, can you find any closers in this race that are worth taking a look at?
Yeah, that was going to be my exact point. I certainly can't argue with the pace projector. I think the pace is going to be fast, but I don't think there's any real closers in this race. When I was handicapping it, I was trying to make a case for one, and I couldn't come up with one, none that I trust anyway. So I wound up with my top selection being Bronx Beauty, just a horse who I think is probably going to be the speed of the speed in here. She's proven to be a game horse who's able to battle up front with some other fast horses and hang around. She doesn't always win, but she almost always runs well. And just in a race that left me kind of scratching my head looking for an alternative, I landed on her.
It's a funny race because you've got a bunch of fillies in here who just seem to love to win races. I mean, Bronx Beauty's 8 for 14 lifetime. A Bit of Both is 7 for 9 lifetime. Ladies Island's a 12-time winner. I mean, even Heaven Has My Nikki is 1/2 her starts. So it's going to be interesting to see how they all handle this situation where they're probably not in ideal circumstances dueling with each other. I mean, if I had to go with one of the speed horses, it would probably be Heaven Has My Nikki, because at least she's drawn outside of all of the others. And while she's probably not doing her getting an ideal trip if she's rating, if she's doing it outside of horses and not taking a lot of kickback, maybe that helps her a little bit. She's definitely got the speed figures to compete against these horses. She's been successful against graded stakes company in the past. So I just kind of trust Heaven Has My Nikki a little bit more than some of the horses drawn to the inside. I've got no problem with Bronx Beauty for all the reasons you mentioned. She's just a real hard knocking sort who seems like she's really best going the 6 furlongs. So I kind of prefer those two of the speeds over A Bit of Both, and especially Ladies Island, who I don't really trust in this race. If I was going to look for one closer, I was trying to make a case for Stormy Embrace. I'd probably upgrade her a little bit because of the pace situation. I just worry about her current form because she was so good over the summer, and it just seems like her that level of performance has left her recently because her last two efforts against the state breds have just been pretty poor. And also, it's not like she's a horse that wants to rally from that far off the pace anyway, so I'm not sure how much she's really going to be helped.
Yeah, I tried it. Stormy Embrace was the one I tried to land on. But my thing is, I'm a little concerned that maybe her being off the pace the last couple is more of her just being off form and losing her early speed. Because when I look at her good races, she's usually right up near the front. I have no problems with Heaven Has My Nikki. As you said, she should at least get a good trip from the outside. I do want to mention she is part owned by a friend of mine, Lee Butler. So I'll be rooting for her. And even if I don't bet on her, I will be rooting for her. Another horse you mentioned, Bit of Both. I did want to bring up, we don't have a figure for her last race at Ocala Training Center. I do usually make figures for those races, but the data was a bit of a mess. I actually checked on it a couple times a few days later, and the charts were still not very good. So now that I see they are up to date, I am going to go back and make figures for those. I don't know if it'll make it in time for the past performances on Saturday, but there will be something for those races at Ocala.
That's good to note, and we'll look for that in the future. But I think this is a treacherous race to start off any multi-race sequences because there are a lot of ways to go, and it seems like pretty unpredictable how the pace is going to impact to this spot because they all have the same running style. Let's move on to the 8th race, the Rampart Stakes, another Grade 3 event for the fillies and mares, this time going the one-turn mile on the dirt. And once again, the pace projector is predicting a fast pace, but there's not quite as much speed in this one, or at least I don't think it's going to be quite as contested a pace, because the number 11, Cookie Dough, she's pretty quick in the early going, and she's got an aggressive rider on board in Paco Lopez. You see this string of really fast workouts coming into this race. I would imagine Cookie Dough is just going to be on a dead cent of the front here.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, I don't have any problem with the pace projector. I think it's good, but I'm not a fan of Cookie Dough as a horse who's going to probably take a bit of money, might even be the favorite in here. I know we're going to get to your horse in a minute. I cheated. I've seen out of the gate, so I know who you're going to pick. So I'm not going to steal your thunder. I do like her, and we'll get to her in a minute. But the horse I landed on was the 6, Molto Bella. I actually really like this filly's return race. She had won a nice stakes race at Tampa early last year. I think it was back in January. She won the Gasparilla with what was a nice 101 TimeformUS speed figure at the time. They then jumped her up in the class to the Rachel Alexander at the fairgrounds, and she showed some speed before fading, didn't do a whole lot of running, and I assume something went wrong that day because we didn't see her again until November, a layoff of a good 8 or 9 months, I guess that is. And she came back at Churchill, and I just really liked her race. It was kind of a very moderate pace that day. She kind of sat in between horses, was pinned in a little bit, and I thought she was really game to fight her way. And once she got clear, she really exploded late. Got a nice 107 Timeform US speed figure, so improved on her previous best that she earned as a young 3-year-old. And like I said, I just like the way she did it. And in truth, this isn't a very strong Grade 3 race. I believe that 107 is actually the best last race Timeform US speed figure coming into the race. So that's why I went with Molto Bella.
I've got no problem with her. I think you make a lot of good points about her. The only thing I would add to that is that the only 2 times that she's run poorly since her debut is when they asked her to go 2 turns. They were trying to make her into Kentucky Oaks type of horse for a while. I just don't think that really suited her, and she seems like a one-turn kind of horse, so the one-turn mile is probably ideal for her. I would definitely use her. She's in my top 3 picks somewhere, just not my top pick. Before I get to the horse that I picked in this race, I want to get your perspective on the morning line favorite, Baccarat Fashion, because both in this race and in the Harlan's Holiday, which we're going to discuss a little later, we've got horses coming out of Gulfstream Park West, and I know the figures there can be a little difficult to make. There's actually a big discrepancy here between the figure that you gave Baccarat Fashion last time and the buyer number, which I guess the morning line maker must have looked at to make her such a short price, because her prior form doesn't make her even remotely competitive in this race. What's your take on Baccarat Fashion, and how much faith do you have in those Gulfstream Park West figures?
I didn't have any trouble making her figure for that day. I actually went and checked. I went back and looked at the charts. We actually had the runner up, moving up 9 points off her previous dirt race. All the other horses had run similar or even better figures. There was one horse who came back and ran a new top while winning, Sean's Idea, who ran 5th that day, I think. But it wasn't anything crazy out of the ordinary that would make me think that I got the figure wrong. So while she won easily, I mean, it just wasn't much of a field. All the top horses were huge prices. The favorite didn't really do any running that day, so it's kind of hard to think she ran back to her figure. I think she had run a just north of 100 figure that day, and just didn't do a whole lot of running. So when you get beat as the favorite, I'm not really going to project that you ran your race, especially when you get as beat as easily as she did that day.
Yeah, you're not going to hear me bashing morning lines too much. That's not really, I'm not really in the business of doing that. But Baccarat Fashion, we'll see what price she is. Just regardless of that, I didn't see her as being a real contender in this race because she's never gone the mile before. She hasn't really given me the feeling that she wants to go a mile. Her improvement recently seems like it was a surprise because she won her last 2 races at odds of 23-1 and 11-1. So if she is a short price in this race, I don't think she's the kind of horse you're supposed to accept a short price on because you kind of missed your opportunities to cash on her. And she also could get caught up in a quick pace, and I don't know if she's fast enough to go with Cookie Dough early, and we'll see how fast they go up front. I hope they go pretty quick because my top pick in this race needs a lot of pace, and that's the number 4, Pink Sands. I'll admit I've been chasing this horse for a little while. I've liked her in a number of races recently. I do think she's more of a one-turn type of horse. I haven't loved her going the 2 turns, and the 1-turn mile seems like it's ideal for her. She actually won going this distance at Gulfstream Park last year. She's won 2 races at Gulfstream Park out of her 4 career wins. I think you can make some excuses for her recent races. 3 back in that Chuvy going the mile and an eighth. Number 1, it's too far for her. Number 2, there was just no pace in that race. You see all blue color-coded TimeformUS pace figures. That was just going to work against her. 2 back at Churchill Downs, she ran poorly, but once again, not a lot of pace. A race that was mostly dominated towards the front end. She never really got a chance to run, was sort of in traffic at the back of the pack the entire way. And then last time out at Aqueduct, she got more pace to close into that day, but it was one of those days where the kickback seemed to be really intense for a lot of horses. And Saguaro Row, who did close that day, she did so outside of the kickback, whereas Pink Sands was trying to come through inside and between horses. I thought that might have worked against her a little bit. I think the mile's a little better for her than the 7 furlongs. So just hoping she gets the right pace set up, because I do think there's ability in there somewhere with this filly. She just needs everything to go right.
Yeah, I'll definitely have her on my tickets at a price. Like I said, I didn't have any knocks on her. Just didn't want to steal your thunder. I do recommend our listeners watch out of the gate. We cover some of these races and a couple others. And you also get the opinions of Mike Beer and Dan Illman, who are sharp guys as well.
Yeah, a lot of great content on Out of the Gate every week. Let's move on to the turf, the Fort Lauderdale Stakes, a grade 2 event going a mile and an eighth on the turf at Gulfstream Park. And this is a pretty confusing race because you've got horses coming out of a variety of different spots, some turning back in distance, some that seem to be specialists at this distance or are stretching out. And I think you kind of have to make a decision about which kinds of horses you want to take in this race, because one that figures to be a pretty short price, or among the shorter prices, because it's going to be a competitive tote board, is the number 5 Channel Cat. Based on speed figures coming into this race, he kind of is a standout. Just, I'm not sure if he improved because the distances got longer and if he's going to be as effective turning back in distance, or if he's just improved overall as a horse these days.
Yeah, it was a tough call, and he's actually the horse I landed on just because I don't have a whole lot of faith in anybody else. We have this as a race, one of those no-speed races, and it's really hard to argue with. If you look at the past performances, a horse we have shown on the lead in the pace projectors Instilled Regard, who very rarely shows any speed at all. So, if anything, when you see a horse like that on the front, you know it's kind of going to be just a shot in the dark at guessing who the leader's going to be. I didn't really agree with our pace projector that Channel Cat's going to be way back. That does tend to happen often with horses that have been running a mile and a half. Just went on the notion that he has the best speed figures. I'm hoping it's not the distance. I don't love him, but just for having to pick someone, he's the one I came up with.
Yeah, he's definitely a contender in here. We'll see what price he is. I wouldn't want to take too short of a price on a horse that I don't totally trust going back to this distance, because while he has run some competitive speed figures going a mile and an eighth, I mean, he did it in the Ford Marcy, I do feel like he's more suited to those longer distances. He doesn't have much of a turn of foot, just kind of a grinding type, and I think his style is more suited to that. And I want to talk about the pace projector a little bit, because you mentioned Channel Cat and the no speed rating and how it's not really reliable about the placements. I do think that the characterization of no speed is correct, because you just look through this field and there's no front runner. But the horse that I think might be best suited to take advantage of that situation is the number 6 Up the Ante, because at least he's won in gate to wire fashion in the past, which he did 2 back at Saratoga. He's kind of a difficult horse for me to read, because he stepped up to graded stakes in the past and he's run okay, but hasn't really suggested that he's at this level. He ran pretty well last time in that race at Laurel, and the mile and eighth distance seems like it's okay for him. He's got an aggressive rider on board in Paco Lopez. Did you look at him as maybe a horse that could steal this, or is he just not good enough?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly could. He would be the one, if somebody's going to steal it, that I would go with. You mentioned that race at Saratoga, and he did exactly that and was able to hold off Multiplier, who's a pretty good horse in his own right. Now, he did just get away with murder that day, the opening quarter mile, I think it was. We had a 53 pace figure, but given the makeup of this field, it's not impossible that he would do it again. So I certainly wouldn't knock anybody for using his horses and horizontal bets. I know I will be thinking that he could make the lead, but again, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't. It's really going to turn into a rider's race, and I just wasn't really sure what to make of this one, so I don't blame anybody for going deep here.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that because there are a lot of horses in this race that I'm just not that interested in that might take money, like Cross Border, who's 7-2 on the morning line. He ran his best speed figure going much longer than this, so I don't like him turning back that much. His shorter speed figures just don't make him that competitive here. We've talked about admission past. He's just kind of a horse that always that seems to underperform. Marzo is another one that seemed to improve going longer distances. So I'm kind of left with the two Chad Brown horses. We'll see if Flavius is the one that takes more money. He's shorter on the morning line. He certainly took more money when they both raced against each other at Aqueduct last time in an optional claiming race. Flavius had a bit of trouble that day. He was sort of ranking the early going, but he did save ground and was on the inside, and he got clear in the stretch and just didn't have a whole lot of run. I actually thought Instilled Regard ran the much better race because he too got a good trip saving ground, but once they got into the stretch, I thought that I Read Ortiz sort of chose the wrong path. He tried to get him off the rail, and he probably should have followed the winner, Devamani, up the inside, and he might have won the race if he had done so. But Instilled Regard got into the clear at about the 8th pole or the 16th pole, and he was really finishing off that race. I know that Instilled Regard has never won on the turf, but in my opinion, he's run well in all of his turf races. And I just don't think there's that much strength in this field. And I'm not going to be shocked if some of these horses that prefer longer distances don't transform to the shorter trip. And I think Instilled Regard might be able to step up and beat these as sort of a square price.
Yeah, and that's the thing with him. He was actually the one I was torn with Channel Cat as my top pick. I did like that he's 8-1 on the morning line, but in truth, I don't think we're going to get it. We'll be lucky to get half of that. So I just it was a toss of the coin between those two. Not a race I love, but I think it is a decent betting race if you can come up with a strong opinion.
Yeah, these Gulfstream Park races are actually pretty tough, and I think that trend continues into the Harlan's Holiday, where you have to make a decision about the favorite Prince Lucky. Based on speed figures, Prince Lucky's just the horse to beat, and if he repeats some of his New York races, he's just going to beat this field. But I think the big question with Prince Lucky is the 1.16 distance of this race, because while he's gone this distance before, he's done it in that one-turn configuration at Belmont Park. He's actually never raced successfully around 2 turns. He's tried it in the past earlier in his career, and they've just been pretty poor efforts generally. I think he's lost all of those races by double-digit lengths. Now, you could say he's just improved a lot recently, and that happens to coincide with him focusing on one-turn races, but I'm a little skeptical of taking a horse that has to do something for the first time as a favorite.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to be the favorite, to be honest. I'm not a guy to knock morning line guys, especially you, David, but I don't see any way War Story's going to be the second choice in here, but maybe I could be wrong there. But I think Bodie Express is going to be the favorite, and for that reason, that's why I went with Prince Lucky. I do have a little reservations about him going 2 turns, as you do, but I like him as an older, more mature horse that's able to relax since he tried. I like that he drew the inside in that tough mile in a 16th configuration at Gulfstream, where there's a very short run to the first turn. So I'm hoping Johnny Velasquez, who is very aware of the tendencies at Gulfstream, is going to hustle him out of the gate and at least get good position. I don't expect him to outrun Bodie Express early, but I just think that one's going to get overbet off his reputation. He's had two easy wins the last 2 timeouts, but he basically beat absolutely nobody in these races. He won exactly as you would expect him to, and I just think he hasn't come across a horse like Prince Lucky outside of his chase on the Triple Crown Trail, where he didn't make a whole lot of a dent after the Florida Derby.
Yeah, Bodie Express is a difficult horse for me to assess because this is another one where the buyer's a little bit in conflict with the TimeformUS speed figure. But I think this is a situation where the TimeformUS number just got knocked down a little bit because the pace was so slow, and that really did benefit Bodie Express. I mean, look, he won really impressively that day, and it seemed like he had something left in the tank. And I shouldn't really worry about the stretch out in distance because he went the 1 1/8 in the Florida Derby, as you mentioned. I do think this horse has plenty of talent. We'll just see what price he is, because I agree with you. I'm not going to be shocked if he really does get bet down off that 4-1 morning line. We'll see if that ultimately happens and if he's shorter than Prince Lucky. But I kind of wanted to take a shot against both of these horses. I just didn't feel like either one was standing on particularly solid ground, and this was just a tougher spot for Bodie Express. Beyond those two, I think there are others to consider in this race. I mean, Flowers for Lisa is probably going to go to the front. We'll see if he's good enough. War Story, who you mentioned. I mean, I don't love a trainer switch away from Jorge Navarro, and Elizabeth Douglas does a good job, but she doesn't have great numbers off trainer switches over the past 5 years. She's just 3 for 26, excluding horses that raced first off the claim, just trainer switches. So I wanted the bigger price in this race because I think this is one where the favorites could be a little bit overbet. So I went for the number 8, Realm. I know that Realm's not really a winning type, and he mostly picks up checks finishing second and third, but Realm has some races in him that make him competitive here. And you can make some excuses recently. Last time out, Bone Raison, who is a really good horse when he shows up. He doesn't always show up with his best effort, but when he does, he's a graded stakes type. Just got loose on the front end, and Realm couldn't quite catch him. 2 back, he was in the slop, and Realm doesn't really like a sloppy track. 3 back in that race that I'm not going to try to remember the name of, going 1.5 miles. He was sort of wide the entire way, and that was a day that the rail really seemed like the place to be on the dirt at Belmont Park. And prior to that, he had run some speed figures that make him pretty competitive here. So I feel like Realm, if he just gets back to his best races, he's going to be around at the end. We'll see if he can actually get into the winner's circle, but he's going to be a price in this spot, so I wanted to get some value.
Yeah, I can't blame you for taking a shot and looking for a price. That's always my first leaning is to go that way. I just couldn't make a case for him, but I have no arguments against yours.
And I think those are all the major contenders in this race. I don't know if there's anybody else you really wanted to discuss, but I think we mostly covered the Harlan's Holiday. Let's move away from Gulfstream Park and on to New York, where they're running a $500,000 stakes race for New York breds, actually 2 of them, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. The Saturday one for the Colton Geldings, though, I think is the much more interesting race, and we're going to discuss that one. It's a 14-horse field going 7 furlongs. Obviously, everybody with New York bred on the backstretch that has won a race wants to take a shot for a $500,000 pot, but you've got 2 major contenders in this spot that are probably going to take the bulk of the play, those being the number 13 Dream Bigger and the number 8 Captain Bombastic. Even though it's a big field, do you feel like it's just a 2-horse race?
I mean, nothing would surprise me with this kind of money up for grabs. I mean, the pace could just get crazy out there. It tends to happen a lot of times when you have horses who probably, not to knock the horses, but they're probably not really worthy of running for this kind of purse. But it is what it is. And as a betting race, you couldn't ask for much better. So I would be surprised if one of those 2 didn't win. I wound up settling on Captain Bombastic. I do think the pace is going to be kind of hot, just as the pace projector says. For one, like I said, when you put that kind of money up, you got a lot of horses stretching out off of wins that's shorter, who just broke their maiden. And I like that Captain Bombastic has showed he can read. He did it in his debut win at 6.5 furlongs. He was able to come from pretty far back in the field to get up and win easily. Then last time when he stretched out the 1-turn mile at Belmont, he showed a lot of grit and determination to hold off Cleon Jones through the lane, because even as I watched the replay, I knew he was going to win. And watching, I still thought he was going to lose. So I just like this horse. He ran a nice 100 TimeformUS speed figure, which is second best in the field to Dream Bigger, who's going to be the favorite, the other horse you mentioned. This one has run as fast as 109 last time. I have no real knocks on him. I'm just hoping he's going to face too much pressure and get a little, tied up in that hot pace up front and not handle that 7th furlong.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think Captain Bombastic is going to be tough in this race just because of the pace situation, because Dream Bigger's got to get the 7 furlongs, and that could be difficult for him because he got pressure from Munaki last time. Munaki's back in this race, drawn right outside of Dream Bigger, so that's not ideal for him. And Dream Bigger was getting kind of tired at the end of that 6 furlong race. I mean, he had a right to because they went some honest fractions up front, but if he's tiring at the end of a 6 furlong race, I mean, we'll see what happens going to 7, but I don't feel like he necessarily has to win this race, even though he does have a significant TimeformUS speed figure advantage over this field. And of the 2, I think Captain Bombastic is the one that I slightly prefer. I wouldn't get too caught up in the fact that it says he was a vet scratch last time. Those vet scratches can be kind of misleading, and I think it's actually pretty rare that they're due to a physical issue. They had actually announced days ahead of that when he was entered that day that he was not going to run because they were awaiting this race, so don't put too much stock in that vet scratch. Captain Bombastic has just been really game in both of his prior career starts, especially last time when he looked like he was going to get passed by Cleon Jones in the stretch and just battled back. I just think he's coming into this race in good form and he's going to get a good trip. My problem is that it's a large competitive field and these two are going to be pretty short prices, which could make the others drift up to more bettable prices. And I just want to take a shot against them with somebody who might be a square price. And for me, that's the number 12 Giant Shoes. I know this horse has to get a lot faster off his debut, but I liked what I saw from him first time out for Brad Cox. He was entered for the turf that day, but I'm sure they weren't that upset that it came off, because if you look at his pedigree, it really is way more of a dirt pedigree. He's by Giant Surprise, who's not a turf sire, and the Dam Side, he's a half to Frosty Ann, who is really more of a dirt horse, won a bunch of New York bred stakes races. So this horse seems like more of a dirt horse than a turf horse to me, and he handled the sloppy track last time, and there's a lot of rain predicted to fall tonight into tomorrow when this race is going to be run. So he wouldn't mind if the track comes up sloppy again. He's going to get pace, and while he does have to get faster, I found a stat for Brad Cox. If you look in DIRA Formulator, you can look up stats like this and use some specific filters. Last out debut winners coming back on the dirt in their second career starts over 5 years. Brad Cox is 17 for 41, winning at a 41% clip, 282 ROI with those types of horses. So that says to me these types of horses usually improve second time out.
Yeah, and that's what you want to do. You're not necessarily betting figures for what they ran in the past. You're betting what you think they're going to run today. And he's certainly one eligible to improve, and that applies to 2-year-olds more than anyone. So I can't fault you at all for taking a shot with that one.
Let's stick with the 2-year-olds and head down to Remington Park for that springboard mile. $400,000 on the line, going the flat mile around 2 turns. Another large field here and a pretty competitive field. There are some horses that are shipping in from other venues that are probably going to take a lot of money. First and foremost among those, I would imagine, is the number 4 Answer In, who was an impressive maiden winner last time out for the aforementioned Brad Cox at Churchill Downs. This horse is going to have to continue to get a little bit faster, but he's all upside at this point and looks like one that could easily make his way onto the Derby trail with a nice win here.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with him. He's a deserving favorite. Not only did he win last time out when trying 7 furlongs for the first time, he did it coming off of a pretty pedestrian pace. We have the half mile and the 6 furlongs coated in blue, but the way he finished off the race, I mean, it's really hard to knock. The only thing I don't really like about him is the price. He's 5-2 on the morning line. He is trying 2 turns for the first time, but he certainly looked like it wasn't going to be a problem for him. So again, nothing negative to say about him. I'm more against a horse like Rowdy Yates, who could very well vie for favoritism with him. The Steve Asmussen trained horse is coming in off of 2 wins, but they were against Oklahoma breds. Wasn't a very strong fields. He kind of towered over him. He was 1-5 both times and didn't run particularly fast. So if I have a real opinion in this race, it's against him. He did have a decent speed figure when he ran 5th to Dennis's Moment 3 back, but that's one that just hasn't proven to be a strong race. We haven't had a lot of runners come back and run very good races from that one. I'm not even counting Dennis's Moment in that, who had that disastrous start in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But, you know, even as a figure guy, I have to question that one a little bit, how valid it is. So if I was going to look at a Steve Asmussen horse in here, I would tend to look at Shoplifted, who's also coming out of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile I mentioned with Dennis's Moment. He didn't run at all that day, but even so, his speed figure came back in 96, which stacks up nicely with the others in here. So I'm a little torn between Answer In and Shoplifted, and just what kind of value we're going to get on the board.
Yeah, I really agree with almost everything you said. I do think Answer In has a lot of talent. The one thing I would add about Answer In is that if you watch both of his races, he's a really bad gate horse. He broke slowly in his debut, and it's not noted in the comment for whatever reason last time out at Churchill Downs, but if you watch that replay, he breaks over a length slowly and has to catch up to the field. That's not a trait that you want to see a horse carry forward as he gets further into his career. You want to see them get over it after one start. But if he breaks slowly again here in this large field, that might not be to his advantage. Even though a fast pace is predicted, you don't want to see a horse breaking slowly like that as they continue to step up in class. So that's something to watch for with Answer In. Regarding the 2 Steve Asmussen horses, I totally agree. I don't like Rowdy Yates that much. I like Shoplifted a lot more. If I was making picks in this race, I would probably make Shoplifted my top pick. I'm don't think we're probably going to get, I don't think we're going to get 5-1 on him because he's coming out of 3 straight grade 1 races, even though, he didn't run well in those races. He's just getting some major class relief here. And I'm of two minds about Shoplifted because on one hand, he's the class of this race, and I think he's really going to appreciate getting into an easier spot. On the other hand, I imagine he's probably going to ultimately best going around one turn, maybe being a sprinter, because he showed a lot of speed first time out in his debut win at Saratoga. And they're just stretching him out because that's where the big purses are and there's more money in these races. So I get why they're doing it, but I really do think given his pedigree, he's going to be better going shorter in the future. But this is just a mile. I know it's 2 turns. He's going to get a good pace setup. So I think Shoplifted makes a lot of sense. I agree about Rowdy Yates. He's not a horse that interested me that much at a short price. 2 others to discuss that might take money, the number 8 and Bolden, moving back to the dirt. To me, he's just a turf sprinting type. I don't really like this stretch out. And also Maximiliano could take money as well. He's intriguing to me, Maximiliano, because he ran pretty well at Keeneland last time, and it seemed like he did so battling back inside at a time when you did not want to be inside on the main track. So maybe he deserves some extra credit for that performance.
Yeah, if a horse is going to be able to steal it on the lead, I think it's him. He might have the speed to clear. There is a short run to the first turn going a mile at Remington. It's not, so you got to be pretty quick. You got to break clean, and that is a little bit of my apprehension with the answer in, too. If he doesn't break well, you can easily get shuffled back and then have to swing wide, and that's just not ideal at Remington.
So we'll watch and see how these races shape up because a lot of fast paces predicted this weekend, and we'll see if they actually turn out that way. But glad we had some differences of opinion this week because it makes it more fun to discuss these races. Craig, always fun to talk about this stuff with you. We'll, of course, be back on Tuesday to recap all of these races as well as much more on the TimeformUS Pacecast. As always, you can listen to us on both Tuesdays and Fridays on the TimeformUS Forecast and the TimeformUS Pacecast by subscribing to the Daily Racing Form channel on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. Just check us out each week. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you again on Tuesday.